My fiancée called me ugly in front of her friends, broke up with me at a restaurant, and dumped the entire bill in my lap before walking out. As she left, she sneered that a guy like me should be grateful she ever agreed to marry me. I didn't argue or chase her, I just sat there, paid, and waited. Because she had no idea what was about to come back to her once the truth started unraveling. Before I get into how that night spiraled into something far bigger, do me a quick favor, show a little support by subscribing, and drop a comment saying where you're watching from. It helps stories like mine reach people who might need to hear them. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 31 years old, and until that night, I genuinely believed I was days away from marrying the woman I loved. Alyssa Moore and I had been together for a little over 2 years. We weren't perfect, but we had routines that felt like a future, lazy Sundays, family holidays, inside jokes that only made sense to us. We were engaged. At least, I thought we were solid. Alyssa had always been confident, borderline ruthless about it. I used to admire that. She spoke her mind, didn't sugarcoat things, and liked to say she just told the truth. Over time, that truth started cutting deeper. Little comments at first. Jokes about my haircut. Suggestions that certain clothes didn't do me any favors. I laughed them off, told myself she was teasing, that couples roast each other sometimes. Looking back, I can see how often she chipped away at me while calling it honesty. That Friday, she texted me out of the blue saying she wanted me to join her for dinner with some friends from work. That alone caught my attention. Alyssa almost never mixed her work life with our relationship. She said it was a grown-up restaurant, downtown, the kind that didn't list prices on the menu. I hesitated, money had been tight after the holidays, but I was excited. This felt like a step forward. Like she was finally proud to show me off. I bought a new shirt. Nothing flashy. Just something clean and well-fitted. I even trimmed my beard twice, second-guessing myself in the mirror like a teenager before prom. The restaurant, Le Ver Noir, was exactly what I feared and hoped it would be: dim lighting, minimalist decor, servers who spoke softly like noise cost extra. Alyssa was already there with 2 coworkers, Victor Hale and Marco Ruiz. The moment I approached the table, something felt off. Alyssa barely looked at me. No smile. No kiss. Just a quick glance and a flat, "You're late." I was 2 minutes late. Parking had been a nightmare. I sat down, trying to brush it off. That's when she looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you wore that." Not quietly. Not privately. Victor and Marco exchanged looks, the kind people share when they don't want to laugh but absolutely will later. My face burned. I asked if there was a dress code I missed, trying to keep it light. Alyssa shrugged and said they'd already ordered appetizers. The next hour was miserable. Alyssa dominated the conversation, talking about her job at Brightline Marketing Solutions like she was running the entire company. Every time I tried to add something, she interrupted or corrected me. When I mentioned a challenge at work, she waved it off and said I wouldn't really understand how high-level corporate pressure works. I manage a retail team. I've done it for years. Apparently, that made me invisible. Victor asked how we met. I started to answer how Maya Reynolds, my closest friend, had introduced us. Alyssa cut me off mid-sentence and laughed. Maya felt bad for him, she said. I was basically doing a charity favor. My stomach dropped. That wasn't even remotely true. Maya had warned me about Alyssa's ego before setting us up, but said she had a good heart underneath it. I excused myself to the bathroom before I embarrassed myself by reacting. Inside the stall, I texted Maya asking what the hell was going on. Before she could reply, my phone buzzed with a notification. Alyssa had tagged herself at the restaurant on social media with the caption, "Work crew dinner." No mention of me. No hint I existed. I stood at the sink longer than necessary, staring at my reflection and trying to pull myself together. I told myself to just get through dinner. Don't give her the satisfaction. When I returned, the waiter brought our mains. I ordered one of the cheaper options. Alyssa noticed immediately. She made a joke about me training for a marathon and then added, casually, that carbs were a bold choice for someone built like you. Victor laughed. Marco looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. By the time the bill came, I felt hollow. The waiter placed it on the table. Alyssa picked it up, glanced at it, then slid it toward me. "I don't think this is working," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. I stared at her, waiting for the joke. There wasn't one. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, that she wasn't attracted to me anymore. That she'd tried. That I should be grateful she even agreed to engage a guy like me. Then she walked out with her friends, laughing. I sat there alone with a bill that could have paid my groceries for weeks. And that's when everything changed. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember signing the receipt. I just remember the sound of my own breathing as I sat there, shoulders tight, staring at a table set for 4 when I was suddenly 1. The waiter hovered nearby with that careful pity people think is kindness. I nodded, handed over my credit card, and watched the total flash across the screen. $341. For humiliation. I walked out of Le Ver Noir feeling like the floor might give out beneath me. The cold night air hit my face, and that's when my hands started shaking. I made it to my car before the first wave hit, anger, disbelief, a sharp sting right behind my eyes. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, replaying her words over and over. Ugly. Grateful. A boy like you. I called Maya before I even pulled out of the parking lot. She answered on the second ring, and the moment I heard her voice, everything spilled out in broken sentences. She didn't interrupt. She didn't minimize it. She just said, "I'm coming over," and hung up. By the time I got home to Cedar Heights Apartments, she was already there with ice cream, takeout, and the kind of righteous anger that made me feel less alone. I paced my living room while she sat on the couch, listening as I replayed every detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, too quiet. "Daniel," she said carefully, "I need to ask you something. What exactly did Alyssa say about her job tonight?" I frowned. The usual. Big projects. Leading teams. Promotions around the corner. Why? Maya exhaled slowly. Because? I don't think she's telling the truth. That stopped me cold. Maya had always been polite to Alyssa, but she'd never been fooled by her. She pulled out her phone and showed me messages from Noah Bennett, someone Alyssa worked with. They'd reconnected recently at a networking event, and apparently Noah had been venting. According to him, Alyssa wasn't a rising star at Brightline Marketing Solutions. She wasn't leading anything. She was an assistant. Not even a senior one. Her business trips were training days. The team she bragged about was 2 interns. And the presentation she'd claimed credit for? She'd been running the slides. I felt sick. 2 years of stories, stitched together with confidence and just enough truth to sound real. I thought about the times I'd paid for dinners because she was between reimbursements. The way she dodged specifics when I asked questions. The late nights that never quite lined up. That night, after Maya left, I didn't sleep. I went through our old texts, photos, social posts. The inconsistencies jumped out now that I knew where to look. Dates she said she was out of town when her location showed otherwise. Stories about coworkers who didn't exist. Even her engagement announcement draft, never posted, was carefully worded to make it sound like I was lucky to be chosen. At 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hey, Daniel. It's Noah. Maya gave me your number. There's some stuff you should probably know." That's when confusion turned into something sharper. We met for coffee the next day. Noah looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be the messenger but felt obligated. He confirmed everything Maya had said, and then some. Alyssa had been on thin ice at work for months. She'd taken credit for others' ideas, exaggerated her role, even lied on her professional profile. There was talk of probation. "She tells people you're insecure," Noah said gently. "That you push for commitment and she's holding you back." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. She'd been the one pushing timelines. Engagement. Wedding venues. Next steps. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was her mother, Elaine Moore. I almost didn't answer. Elaine had always been kind to me, remembered my birthday, asked about my job, hugged me like I was already family. She sounded cheerful, completely unaware. She asked if everything was okay between Alyssa and me. Mentioned Alyssa's birthday dinner that weekend. Said the whole family was excited to see me because Alyssa told them we had big news to share. I felt dizzy. Alyssa had publicly dumped me, humiliated me, and walked away, then gone home and told her family we were fine. More than fine. Celebrating. I told Elaine we were figuring things out. I didn't know what else to say. When I hung up, Maya stared at me like she already knew what I was thinking. "You're not letting this slide," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm not." We didn't talk about payback or confrontation. We talked about honesty. About how people like Alyssa survive by controlling the narrative. I wasn't going to scream or post or chase her down. I was just going to stop protecting her version of events. That night, Alyssa texted me for the first time since the restaurant. "We need to talk." I think emotions ran high. I didn't reply. Instead, I confirmed something else. I was going to that birthday dinner. I barely slept the night before Alyssa's birthday dinner. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that restaurant again, the smirk, the way she said my name like it embarrassed her, the laughter as she walked away. Part of me kept whispering that this was a terrible idea. That the normal, healthy thing would be to block her everywhere and move on. But another part of me, the part that had been talked over, minimized, and quietly insulted for 2 years, was done being silent. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Alyssa. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Wear something nice. My parents are excited." I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just assumption. Control. As if nothing had happened. I didn't respond. Maya came over in the afternoon with coffee and nerves of steel. She helped me pick out something simple, dark jeans, a clean button-down, nothing flashy. "You don't need to prove anything," she reminded me. "Just be calm. Let her do the rest." On the drive to Oak Ridge residence, my hands shook so badly I had to pull over once just to breathe. I kept asking myself why I was doing this. The answer was uncomfortable but honest, because I wanted my truth to exist in the same room as her lies. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. Cars lined the driveway. The house glowed warmly, full of voices and laughter. Alyssa's father, Richard, opened the door with a wide smile and pulled me into a hug like nothing had changed. The smell of home-cooked food hit me, and for a brief moment, grief washed over me. I liked her family. That made this harder. Then I saw Alyssa. She was mid-laugh, holding a drink, surrounded by cousins. The second our eyes met, her smile froze. Panic flickered across her face before she masked it with that familiar confident expression. She walked over, stiffly hugged me, and whispered, "We need to talk. Privately." I smiled and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Of course. Wouldn't miss your birthday. Especially since you told everyone we had big news." Her fingers tightened on my arm. Elaine clapped her hands excitedly and asked if this was what she thought it was. Someone joked about wedding bells. Alyssa went pale. Dinner was announced before she could drag me away. We sat at the table, Alyssa between her parents, me across from her. She barely touched her food. Every time I spoke, she watched me like I was holding a weapon. Conversation drifted to work. Elaine mentioned how proud she was of Alyssa's career and upcoming promotion. Alyssa launched into one of her usual speeches about leadership and big projects. I nodded politely, saying nothing. Then Richard asked about a specific client Alyssa had mentioned before. She fumbled. Gave a vague answer full of buzzwords that meant nothing. Her sister Sophie caught my eye across the table, eyebrow raised. Elaine brought up the big news again. Alyssa stammered something about timing. Her grandmother, Margaret, cut in bluntly, asking if we were moving in together. Alyssa choked on her water. I waited. Then I casually said, "Speaking of dinners, Alyssa took me to an incredible restaurant last week. Le Ver Noir. That's where I met Victor and Marco." The room went quiet. Before Alyssa could respond, the doorbell rang. Elaine opened it, smiling. "Noah." What a surprise. Alyssa's face drained of color. Noah Bennett stepped inside holding a folder, apologizing for interrupting but saying he needed Alyssa's signature on some work documents. Richard insisted he stay. "Family dinner," he said warmly. Noah sat down, clearly uncomfortable. Richard asked how work had been going, mentioning the presentation Alyssa had supposedly led. Noah hesitated, glanced at me, then at Alyssa. "Well," he said slowly, "the presentation went fine. Our director delivered it. Alyssa helped prepare the slides." The silence was heavy. Sophie asked, "Wait, what's Alyssa's actual role again?" Alyssa laughed nervously, tried to deflect. "It's complicated." Noah swallowed. "She's an administrative assistant in marketing." Elaine froze. Richard set his fork down. Margaret muttered something under her breath. Alyssa snapped, saying Noah was confused, that he didn't understand how things worked. But questions came fast, titles, promotions, timelines. Her stories collapsed under their own weight. Elaine tried to regain control, suggesting dessert. Sophie turned to me. "Daniel," she said gently, "you mentioned the restaurant. What happened?" I took a breath and told them everything. The insults. The breakup. The bill. The words she'd used. Alyssa interrupted, accusing me of exaggerating, of embarrassing her. Richard shut her down with a look I'd never seen before. Noah spoke up, confirming that Alyssa had bragged at work about putting me in my place. Alyssa stood up, shouting that everyone was against her, that I'd turned them all against her. She pointed at me and said, "A man like you should be grateful I even chose you." Margaret laughed sharply. "Chosen? Please." Alyssa stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture rattled on the wall. The aftermath was surreal. Elaine apologized over and over. Richard looked crushed. Sophie hugged me. Noah apologized for being part of the chaos. They asked me to stay for cake. I did. Later, Richard thanked me for my honesty. Elaine cried quietly in the kitchen, saying she didn't recognize her daughter anymore. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. Alyssa, you've ruined everything. This isn't over. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. I woke up the next morning to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. For a split second, still half asleep, I thought it was my alarm malfunctioning. Then I saw the screen. 17 missed calls. Elaine. Sophie. Noah. Unknown numbers. My chest tightened instantly. That many calls, that early, never meant something small. I sat up too fast, the room spinning slightly, and scrolled through the notifications. Several voicemails. Text messages stacked on top of each other, all saying some version of, "Call me now," and, "Are you okay?" My first thought, irrational but immediate, was that someone had been hurt. Or worse. I called Elaine back first. She answered on the first ring, her voice strained and exhausted. What she told me made my stomach drop. After Alyssa stormed out of the birthday dinner, she didn't go home. She went drinking. A lot. Around 2 in the morning, she showed up at the apartment of an ex-boyfriend, one I hadn't even known existed, yelling, crying, accusing him of conspiring with me to ruin her life. He called Sophie in a panic. Sophie had to drive across town to get her. That wasn't all. Elaine said Alyssa had spent the rest of the night sending aggressive, rambling messages to anyone she thought had taken my side. She'd texted Noah, threatening to destroy his reputation at work. She'd posted a long, incoherent rant online about betrayal and fake people. And the part that made Elaine's voice crack, Alyssa had messaged one of her friends with my address, saying she was done being nice and that I needed to learn consequences. I sat there in silence, phone pressed to my ear, my pulse pounding. Elaine apologized over and over. I told her she didn't need to. None of this was her fault, but that didn't stop her from crying anyway. She asked if I was safe. I told her yes, but as soon as the call ended, I wasn't sure I believed it. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. Not pounding. Not aggressive. Just firm. I checked through the peephole before opening it. Elaine and Sophie stood there, both looking worn down, holding coffee and a small bag of pastries like peace offerings. I let them in. We sat around my tiny kitchen table, the kind with the uneven leg I'd been meaning to fix for months. They filled me in on what happened after I left. Sophie explained that this wasn't the first time Alyssa's lies had spiraled when confronted. In college, she'd exaggerated her achievements constantly. Claimed leadership roles she didn't have. Invented stories to stay impressive. She's always needed to be the most admired person in the room, Sophie said quietly. When that cracks, she panics. While we were talking, my phone buzzed again. Noah. He texted that Alyssa had been blowing up his phone all morning too. That their boss had already seen screenshots of her late-night posts and messages. Monday at work was going to be bad. Then there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Noah himself. He'd come to warn me in person because Alyssa had mentioned dropping by my place. As he spoke, my phone lit up with a notification. Alyssa had tagged me in a story. Against every instinct, I opened it. It was an old photo of me from early in our relationship, asleep on her couch, mouth slightly open. The caption read, "So much for Mr. Perfect. A boy like this thinks he deserves better." I surprised myself by laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. This was the big move? This was her attempt to regain control? The laughter didn't last. Minutes later, loud pounding echoed through the hallway. My stomach dropped. "That's her," Sophie said immediately. Alyssa's voice followed, slurred and furious, shouting my name and demanding I open the door. Noah stood up instinctively, but I was already calling building security. The pounding turned into kicking. Neighbors' doors cracked open. Security arrived quickly. Alyssa screamed, argued, accused me of lying to her family. When they threatened to call the police, she finally backed off, retreating to the parking lot still shouting insults. Elaine insisted on handling it. She went downstairs with Sophie while Noah stayed with me. From the window, I watched them talk, Elaine crying, Alyssa gesturing wildly, Sophie trying to keep space between them. Eventually, Alyssa got into a car with her father, who must have been called to come get her. The silence afterward felt unreal. Noah and I sat on the couch, both drained. He asked if I had anything to drink. We opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving and didn't bother with glasses at first. By the time he left, the sun was already setting. Maya came over that night and didn't leave. We ordered pizza, watched terrible TV, and tried to pretend my life hadn't turned into a soap opera. Alyssa didn't come back that night. Or the next. Over the following weeks, things slowly unraveled for her. She was fired from Brightline Marketing Solutions after missing work and sending inappropriate messages to coworkers. She moved back in with her parents. She tried contacting me through fake accounts, emails, even mutual acquaintances. I blocked every attempt and documented everything. The strangest moment came about a month later. I was at a department store, browsing shower curtains of all things, when I turned and saw Alyssa at the end of the aisle. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. We made eye contact. For a moment, I thought she'd approach me. Instead, she dropped her basket and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. But it wasn't the last consequence. Because what she did that night, the insults, the public humiliation, the lies, had set something irreversible in motion. And while I had stayed quiet, while I had simply waited, the collapse she triggered wasn't finished yet. By the time the final consequences settled into place, my life had slowed down in a way that felt unfamiliar but strangely peaceful. The chaos Alyssa created didn't disappear overnight, it burned itself out slowly, like a fire that runs out of oxygen once no one feeds it anymore. After that last run-in at the store, weeks passed without a single attempt to contact me directly. No new numbers. No fake accounts. No late-night voicemails. At first, I stayed on edge, waiting for the next eruption. But each quiet day made it clearer that whatever power she thought she still had over me was gone. Elaine called once more, about a week after Alyssa lost her job. Her voice sounded older than I remembered. She didn't ask me to fix anything. She didn't defend her daughter. She just wanted me to know they were taking things seriously now, therapy, boundaries, consequences. She apologized again for the restaurant, for the dinner, for everything. I thanked her, genuinely. Then we said goodbye, and that was it. Sophie and I stayed loosely in touch. Not out of obligation, just mutual respect. She told me Alyssa had moved in with an uncle out of state for a fresh start. Social media went dark. No inspirational quotes. No victory posts. Just silence. And with that silence, something shifted inside me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't wondering what I should have said differently or how I could have handled things better. The humiliation from that restaurant night still stung, but it no longer defined me. It became a reference point, a reminder of what I would never tolerate again. I focused on rebuilding my own life, quietly and deliberately. I rearranged my apartment, donated clothes Alyssa had criticized me for wearing, replaced furniture that carried memories I didn't need. I started going to the gym, not to change myself, but to reclaim my body as mine. I spent more time with people who didn't measure my worth by status or appearances. Maya stayed close through all of it. She never once said, "I told you so," even though she absolutely could have. She just reminded me, over and over, that love isn't supposed to make you smaller. That engagement rings don't excuse cruelty. That confidence built by tearing someone else down is hollow by definition. A few months later, I ran into Victor, the coworker from the restaurant, at a networking event. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me but came over anyway. He apologized. Told me Alyssa had been telling very different stories back then. Said he wished he'd spoken up. I accepted the apology and walked away lighter than I expected. The funny thing is, nothing dramatic happened after that. No final showdown. No public apology. No moment where Alyssa suddenly understood everything she'd done wrong. And that turned out to be the most important part. Because closure didn't come from her acknowledging my worth, it came from me no longer needing her to. I learned something through all of this that I didn't expect. Waiting doesn't always mean doing nothing. Sometimes it means holding your ground while the truth catches up on its own. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to chase validation. I just had to stop covering for someone who benefited from my silence. The man she called ugly, the one she thought would shrink, apologize, or beg, walked away instead. And that choice changed everything. If you're listening to this and you've ever been humiliated, dismissed, or made to feel grateful for basic respect, remember this: the moment someone tries to make you feel small is the moment they've revealed exactly who they are. Believe them. Then choose yourself. If this story meant something to you, take a second before you go, support the channel, share where you're listening from, and pass this along to someone who might need it. Some stories don't end loudly, but they end right.